The sound of the manila folder hitting my desk was like a gunshot in the quiet of my study. I looked up from the contract I'd been reviewing, a merger agreement for a telecommunications client in Seoul, and saw Sarah standing in the doorway. The clock on my computer screen read 10:03 p.m. She wasn't wearing the expression of a woman who'd come to talk. "Sign it," she said. I looked down at the folder. 43 pages, I'd later discover. But in that moment, all I saw was the law firm's name embossed in gold lettering across the top. Mitchell & Crane, LLP, expensive attorneys, the kind you hire when you're not interested in being fair. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Divorce papers." She walked into the study, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Louboutins, the red-soled ones I'd bought her for her 40th birthday. "I need you to sign them tonight. Right now." I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, the way I'd learned to handle documents during 24 years of practicing corporate law. Never rush. Never react. The first page confirmed what I'd suspected. Petition for divorce. New York Supreme Court. Sarah Mitchell vs. David Mitchell. "Tonight," I repeated, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. I was buying myself seconds to think. "You have until midnight. That gives you 2 hours." She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. The hallway light behind her cast her face in shadow, but I could see her jaw was set, determined. This wasn't a conversation. It was an ambush. I flipped through the pages. Asset distribution. Spousal maintenance. Custody, not of children, we'd never had any, but of Bailey, our 8-year-old golden retriever who was currently asleep downstairs on his bed by the fireplace. Page 7 stopped me cold. "You're asking for the house," I said. "I'm taking the house. It's in both our names. I bought this house in 1998 with my partnership bonus. You moved in after we got married in 2000. Community property, David. That's how New York works." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. She'd practiced this. "I also want the joint savings account my car paid off in full and Bailey." I kept reading. The joint account held $340,000, money we'd accumulated over 24 years of marriage. My salary had funded most of it, but arguing that point now would be pointless. Page 12 outlined spousal maintenance, $8,500 per month for 5 years. $500,000, essentially, to walk away from a marriage she was ending. "Why tonight?" I asked, setting the papers down and looking up at her. My voice was calm, level. I'd learned a long time ago that the person who shows emotion first loses the negotiation. "Because I'm done pretending." She pushed off from the doorframe and walked to my desk, placing both hands flat on the mahogany surface. "I'm done pretending this marriage is something it isn't. I'm done pretending I'm happy. I'm done pretending you're the man I thought you were." And what man is that? Someone who put his family first, instead of his clients, instead of his career. She leaned closer. "Do you know when you last took me to dinner, David? Actual dinner, not takeout eaten in front of the television while you reviewed contracts." I did know. It had been 4 months, maybe 5. Work had been brutal. 3 major acquisitions, 2 international clients, a promotion to senior partner that had come with a 40% increase in billable hour requirements. "I've been building our future," I said. "You've been building your future. I've just been living in it." She straightened up. "Sign the papers, David. Make this easy." "And if I don't?" Her expression changed. The mask of the grieving wife fell away, and what replaced it was something colder, sharper. "Then I call Gerald Harrington first thing tomorrow morning. I tell him about your affair." My blood went cold. "What affair?" "The one with the paralegal in Chicago. The one you've been carrying on for the past 18 months during your business trips." She smiled, and it was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen on her face. "I have emails, David. Screenshots of hotel reservations, credit card receipts from restaurants. I've been documenting everything. There is no paralegal." My voice remained steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "There is no affair. I've never been unfaithful to you." "I know that, you know that." She picked up the folder and opened it to the signature page, tapping her finger on the line marked Petitioner. "But will Gerald believe it? Will the other partners? Will your clients?" She paused, letting the words sink in. You've spent 24 years building your reputation at Harrington and Associates, senior partner, the guy everyone trusts with their most sensitive deals. What happens when I walk into Gerald's office crying, showing him evidence of your infidelity? What happens when I tell him you've been using firm resources to cover up an affair? I stared at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't recognize the woman standing in front of me. This is extortion, I said quietly. This is leverage. She set the folder back down on my desk and placed the pen, my Mont Blanc, the one I'd gotten when I made partner, directly on top of it. You have until midnight to sign these papers. If I don't have your signature by 12:01 a.m., I'm calling Gerald's personal cell phone. I'm emailing the managing committee. I'm making sure everyone at your firm knows exactly what kind of man you really are. What I really am, I said, is your husband. The man who's supported you for 24 years, who paid for this house, your car, your lifestyle, who never once asked you to work full-time or contribute equally to our finances. And I'm the woman who gave up her career to be your wife, who played hostess at your firm dinners, who smiled and nodded while you worked 70-hour weeks and forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Her voice rose slightly, the only crack in her composure. You want to play the victim here, David? Fine. But you're not the one who's been slowly disappearing in this marriage. I am, and I'm done disappearing. She turned and walked toward the door. 2 hours, she said without looking back. Sign the papers or lose everything you've worked for. Your choice. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I sat there in the silence of my study, surrounded by law books and framed diplomas and the faint smell of the leather chair I'd sat in for a decade. The clock on my computer screen changed from 10:13 to 10:14. Before I show you how patience wins wars, hit that subscribe button if you believe cheaters should never walk away with the prize. I waited until I heard Sarah's footsteps fade down the hallway, then the distant sound of our bedroom door closing at the far end of the house. Only then did I pick up my phone. Richard Vance answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep. This better be an emergency, David. It's 10:17 on a Monday night. Sarah just served me with divorce papers. She wants me to sign them by midnight. I kept my voice low, even though there was no way she could hear me from the other end of the house. If I don't, she's threatening to fabricate evidence of an affair and destroy my reputation at the firm. Silence on the other end. Then I heard the sound of sheets rustling, footsteps, a door closing. Richard was moving to somewhere private. Read me the asset distribution clause, word for word. I opened the folder and found the section. All assets, known and unknown, tangible and intangible, present and future, acquired during the marriage or in contemplation of its dissolution, shall be subject to equitable distribution between the parties. Jesus Christ! Richard's voice was sharp now, fully awake. That language is deliberately broad. She's trying to capture everything, including assets you might acquire in the future. Can she do that? Depends on how clever her attorney is and how sympathetic the judge is to her narrative. But David, listen to me very carefully. I heard the sound of a glass being filled. Water or whiskey, I couldn't tell. Do not sign those papers tonight. Do not sign them tomorrow. Do not sign them this week. Richard, she's threatening. I don't care what she's threatening. I got a call at 4:30 this afternoon from an estate attorney in Connecticut, Norman Pryor. He's handling your Uncle Marcus's estate. The name hit me like cold water. Uncle Marcus, my mother's older brother, 80 years old, stage 4 lung cancer. I'd been meaning to visit him for weeks, but between client meetings and court appearances and the slow, grinding dissolution of my marriage, I'd kept putting it off. What about Uncle Marcus? He's dying, David. Richard's voice softened. Pryor said he has maybe 48 to 72 hours left. He's in hospice in Greenwich. It's just a matter of time now. I closed my eyes. I should go see him. You should, but there's something else you need to know first. A pause. Marcus updated his will 6 months ago. He's leaving everything to you. The estate is valued at $4.1 million. The number didn't register at first. Then it did. $4.1 million. The house in Greenwich, the investment portfolio, the life insurance payout, everything. He specifically designated it as your separate property, with explicit language that it's to remain yours alone in the event of divorce, as long as the inheritance is received after the marriage has irretrievably broken down, but before any formal legal separation is filed. My mind was racing. What does that mean in practical terms? It means if you're still legally married when Marcus dies, and you haven't signed any separation agreements or divorce papers, the inheritance is classified as your separate property under New York law. Sarah can't touch it. Richard's voice became more intense. But if you sign those papers tonight, papers that include language about all assets, present and future, you're potentially giving her a legal argument that she's entitled to a portion of money you don't even have yet. I looked at the divorce papers spread across my desk, at the signature line waiting for my name, at the clock that now read 10:23 p.m. How long do I have to stall? Pryor said Marcus is barely conscious. He's not eating. His breathing is labored. The hospice nurses think he'll pass within 48 hours, possibly less. If you can avoid signing anything until Marcus dies, the inheritance hits your account as separate property. Sarah won't have any claim to it. And if she follows through on her threat, if she calls Gerald tomorrow and claims I had an affair, then we prove she's lying. We pull your credit card statements, your travel records, your phone logs. We depose the hotels, the restaurants, everyone. She'll have nothing because there's nothing to find. And when we prove she fabricated evidence, we bury her in a countersuit for defamation, malicious prosecution, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Richard paused. David, I've known you for 15 years. You're the most boring, ethical, by-the-book person I've ever met. If she tries to claim you had an affair, we'll destroy her. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen and held it over the signature line, feeling its weight in my hand. So I stall for 48 hours. Minimum. Play the devastated husband, have a panic attack, tell her you need time to process, throw up if you have to. I don't care what you do, but do not sign those papers before Marcus dies. What if he holds on longer than 48 hours? Then you keep stalling. This is $4.1 million we're talking about, David. That's not just money. That's freedom. That's leverage. That's the difference between walking away from this divorce with something or walking away with nothing. I thought about Sarah's face when she'd leaned across my desk, the coldness in her eyes, the casual cruelty in her threat. I can do this, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. You have to, because if you sign those papers tonight, you lose everything. The house, the savings, and potentially a substantial portion of that inheritance. Marcus wanted you to have that money. He knew what you'd been going through with Sarah. I talked to Pryor, and apparently Marcus made some comments about wanting to make sure you were taken care of if the marriage ended. He knew. He's known for months. Pryor said Marcus specifically timed the will update for this reason. He was protecting you, David. Don't let Sarah steal that protection by signing papers in a panic. I looked at the clock. 10:28 p.m. I had an hour and 32 minutes until midnight. What do I tell her? Tell her you need time. Tell her you can't think straight. Tell her you'll sign them first thing in the morning if you have to, but not tonight. Richard's voice became firm, almost commanding. And David, do not tell her about Marcus. Do not mention the inheritance. The second she knows there's money coming, she'll change her strategy. She'll delay the divorce, claim she wants to reconcile anything to stay legally married until that money hits your account. Understood. I'll call Norman Pryor first thing tomorrow and get an update on Marcus's condition. In the meantime, you hold the line. No signatures, no agreements, nothing. Thank you, Richard. Don't thank me yet. You've got a long 2 days ahead of you. He paused. And David? I'm sorry about your uncle. I know you two were close. We hung up and I sat there in my study, listening to the house settle around me, the furnace kicking on, the old pipes creaking, the distant sound of traffic on the street outside. Somewhere in Connecticut, in a hospice room I should have visited weeks ago, Uncle Marcus was dying, and I was sitting here doing math, calculating timelines, strategizing how to protect an inheritance I hadn't earned while a good man slipped away. The shame of it hit me harder than Sarah's threat had, but I pushed the shame down, locked it away in whatever part of my brain had learned to compartmentalize during decades of high-stakes negotiations. There would be time for grief later. Right now I had to survive the next 90 minutes. I gathered the divorce papers, straightened them into a neat stack and checked the clock. 10:34 p.m. 86 minutes until midnight. I had to go upstairs and face Sarah. I had to look her in the eyes and refuse to sign these papers without seeming like I was refusing. I had to play the broken man, the devastated husband, the person too overwhelmed to make a decision. I had to lie. I took a breath, picked up the papers, and walked upstairs. Sarah was sitting on the edge of our bed when I knocked on the door at 11:50 p.m. She'd changed into her silk pajamas, the pale blue ones that had once meant something, back when we'd shared this bedroom instead of existing in it like strangers. "Well?" she said. I held up the papers and I let my hands shake. Not much, just enough that she could see. "I can't do this tonight, Sarah." My voice was quiet, strained. "I can't. This is 24 years of my life. I need time to process this, please." She stood up. "You've had 2 hours to process it. 2 hours to process a divorce? 2 hours to accept that my marriage is over?" I let my voice crack slightly. "I need more time. I'll sign them in the morning, I promise. Just not tonight." She walked toward me and I could see her calculating, weighing whether I was broken enough to be trusted or whether I was playing her. I looked down at the floor at my shoes, anywhere but at her face. 8 a.m., she said finally. "You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning to sign those papers. Not 8:15. Not 9, no, 8 o'clock sharp, or I'm calling Gerald Harrington's cell phone and telling him everything. I'll sign them, I promise. I just need the night to say goodbye to this properly." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she took the papers from my hands. "You're sleeping in the guest room, and David?" She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume. Chanel, the one I'd bought her in Paris 5 years ago. "If you try to run, if you try to hide assets, if you do anything other than sign these papers at 8 p.m., I will destroy you. Do you understand?" "I understand." She closed the door in my face. I stood there in the hallway, my heart pounding, and checked my watch. 11:53 p.m. I'd made it past midnight. Sarah's original deadline was gone, but I'd bought myself only until 8 a.m., 9 hours. And Uncle Marcus needed to die within the next 48 hours for any of this to matter. I walked to the guest room, closed the door, and called Richard Vance one more time. "I bought us 9 hours, I said when he answered. "New deadline is 8 a.m. "Then pray Marcus goes peacefully tonight," Richard said, "because if he holds on past tomorrow morning, you're going to have to buy us more time." I lay down on the guest bed, still wearing my suit from work, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in Connecticut my uncle was dying, and I was lying awake hoping he'd die fast. Tuesday morning started at 6 a.m. with 3 text messages from Sarah, each one landing on my phone like a small explosion. "You have 2 hours. Don't even think about being late. 8 a.m., kitchen table, I'll be waiting." I'd slept maybe 90 minutes total. Fragmented, anxious sleep, where I kept jolting awake, checking my phone for missed calls from Richard or Norman Pryor, listening to the house for sounds of Sarah moving around. The guest room was on the east side of the house, and weak November sunlight was starting to filter through the curtains. I sat up, my back aching from the guest bed's cheap mattress, and checked my phone again. No calls, no messages, except Sarah's threats. Uncle Marcus was still alive, which meant I was still on the clock. I stood up, my suit from yesterday wrinkled and uncomfortable, and walked to the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror looked like hell. Grey stubble on my jaw, bags under my eyes, my hair sticking up at odd angles. I looked exactly like a man whose wife had just ambushed him with divorce papers. Good. I needed to look broken. I showered, shaved, and put on fresh clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt instead of a suit. I needed to look like someone too devastated to go to work, someone whose entire world had just collapsed. At 7:30 a.m. I went downstairs. Sarah was already in the kitchen, dressed in yoga pants and a tank top, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had the divorce papers spread out on the kitchen table, the Mont Blanc pen placed precisely in the center of the signature page. "Coffee's fresh," she said without looking up from her phone. "You'll want to be clear-headed when you sign." I poured myself a cup, my hands deliberately unsteady, and sat down across from her. "Sarah, I've been thinking..." Don't. She looked up from her phone, her expression hard. Don't try to negotiate. Don't try to talk me out of this. Don't do anything except pick up that pen and sign your name. I picked up the papers, flipped through them slowly like I was reading them for the first time. Even though I'd memorized every clause, every section, every word that would strip me of everything I'd built. I want to talk to my attorney first, I said quietly. No. Sarah, this is a legal document. I have the right to... You had 2 weeks to talk to an attorney. You had 2 weeks from the moment I told you I wasn't happy, that I wanted out, that this marriage was over. You didn't want to listen then. You don't get to stall now. She leaned forward. Sign the papers, David. It's 7:33. You have 27 minutes. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw Richard Vance's name on the screen, and my heart jumped. I need to take this, I said. You need to sign... I was already walking out of the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. Richard? No news yet. His voice was tense. I called Pryor 20 minutes ago. Marcus is still hanging on. They've increased his morphine dosage, but he's stable, too stable. What does that mean? It means he might last another 24 hours, maybe more. A pause. How much time do you have? I looked at the clock on the wall in the hallway. 25 minutes. Then Sarah's calling my office. Okay, here's what you do. You go back in there and you tell her you'll sign the papers, but you need to read through them one more time. You take your time. You ask questions about every single clause. You drag it out as long as you can. She's not going to buy that, Richard. She knows I've read them already. Then you play dumb. You act confused. You say the legal language is too complicated. You ask her what equitable distribution means, what marital property means, every fucking term on every page. You make her explain it to you. I closed my eyes. That buys me maybe an hour. Then what? Then you have a panic attack. A real one or a fake one, I don't care. You make yourself physically incapable of signing those papers. And when she calls my office anyway, she won't. Not if you're literally having a medical emergency. Even Sarah isn't cruel enough to make threats while you're hyperventilating on the kitchen floor. Richard's voice softened. I know this is hell, David, but we're playing for $4.1 million here. That money changes everything. It changes your divorce settlement. It changes your leverage. It changes your entire future. Hold the line. I'll try. Don't try. Do it. Call me when you need to. He hung up and I stood there in the hallway gathering myself. I could hear Sarah's footsteps in the kitchen, the sound of her pouring more coffee, the casual normalcy of a woman who thought she'd already won. I walked back into the kitchen at 7:39 a.m., 21 minutes until her deadline. Everything okay? Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she didn't actually care. That was my attorney. He advised me to read through the entire document one more time before signing. I sat down and picked up the papers again, flipping to page 1. I want to make sure I understand every clause. You've already read it. I skimmed it. Now I'm reading it properly. I pointed to the first section. What exactly does irretrievable breakdown mean in this context? It means our marriage is over. But legally, what's the definition? What's the threshold for irretrievable? I looked up at her, my expression genuinely confused. I'm not trying to stall. I just want to understand what I'm signing. She exhaled sharply. It means we can't fix this. It means we're done. That's all you need to know. And this section here, all assets known and unknown, present and future. Does that include my 401k, my pension? What about assets I might inherit? It includes everything we've built together during this marriage. But I built my 401k before we got married. Same with my pension. I'd already been at the firm for 3 years when we met. I flipped to page 7. And this clause about the house. You want full ownership, but I bought the house with my partnership bonus in 1998, 2 years before we got married. Doesn't that make it my separate property? We lived in it together for 24 years. I maintained it, I decorated it, I made it a home. Her voice was rising. That makes it marital property. I'm not arguing. I just want to understand the legal reasoning. I turned to page 12. And this spousal maintenance clause, $8,500 a month for 5 years. That's over $500,000. Is that standard? Or can we negotiate? We're not negotiating. She grabbed the papers from my hands. You're stalling. I'm reading. I reached for the papers, but she held them away from me. Sarah, if I'm going to sign away my house, my savings, half my retirement, I need to understand what I'm signing. It's 7:47, David. You have 13 minutes. Then give me the papers and let me read. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I saw something shift in her expression. Suspicion. She was wondering if I was playing her. I needed to give her something real, something that would make her believe I was actually breaking. I was shaking, wanting to scream. Tell me in the comments, could you stay silent for 48 hours while someone insulted you? I stood up, walked to the counter, and gripped the edge of it with both hands. My breathing was coming faster now, deliberately, but also genuinely, because the stress of the past 12 hours was real, and the fear of losing everything was real, and the exhaustion was real. I can't do this, I said, my voice cracking. I can't just sign away 24 years like it meant nothing. It did mean nothing, that's the point. Sarah stood up too, following me to the counter. You spent 24 years building your career and ignoring your wife. You want me to feel sorry for you now? You want sympathy? I want time. You don't get time. You get 13 minutes, 12 now. She grabbed my arm, tried to pull me back toward the table. Sign the papers, David. I pulled away from her, stumbled backward, and my vision actually blurred for a second. The lack of sleep, the stress, the coffee on an empty stomach, it was all catching up to me. I think I'm going to be sick, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. Don't you dare. I walked quickly to the bathroom off the kitchen, closed the door and sat down on the edge of the bathtub. My heart was racing, my hands were trembling, and I could feel sweat breaking out across my forehead. A panic attack, a real one. I pulled out my phone and texted Richard, "Can't do this. She's pushing too hard, about to break." His response came back immediately. "Don't break, breathe, call me." I called and he answered on the first ring. "Put me on speaker," he said. I opened the bathroom door. Sarah was standing right outside, her arms crossed, her expression furious. "My attorney wants to speak with you," I said, holding out the phone. "I don't want to speak with your attorney. I want you to sign the—" "Mrs. Mitchell," Richard's voice came through the speaker, sharp and professional. "This is Richard Vance. I'm advising my client not to sign any documents until we've had an opportunity to review the proposed settlement in detail. David has the right to legal counsel, and I'm recommending we schedule a mediation session for later this week, where both parties can—" "No." Sarah's face was red now, genuinely angry. "No mediation, no delays. He signs these papers now, or I'm calling his office. If you make false accusations against my client, we will pursue legal action for defamation. I want to be very clear about that, Mrs. Mitchell. Fabricating evidence of infidelity is not only unethical, it's illegal, and we will sue. I have evidence." "No, you don't, because there is no affair. There never was an affair. And when we prove that in court, you'll be the one facing consequences." Richard's voice became colder. "David is going to come to my office at 10 a.m. this morning. We're going to review your petition in detail, and we're going to file a response. A fair response that actually reflects the law rather than your personal grievances. If you want a divorce, you'll get one, but you won't get to steal everything he's worked for in the process." Sarah grabbed the phone from my hand. "He has until noon. If I don't have his signature by noon today, I'm calling his office, his clients, and everyone else I can think of. Do you understand?" She ended the call and threw the phone at me. I caught it against my chest. "Noon," she said. "That's your new deadline, 4 hours from now, and David—" She leaned in close. "If you think your attorney's threats scare me, you're wrong. I have nothing to lose. You have everything to lose. Remember that." She walked out of the kitchen and I heard her footsteps going up the stairs, then the bedroom door slamming. I looked at my phone. 8:02 a.m. I'd bought myself 4 more hours. I called Richard back. "Did we just make it worse?" I asked. "No, we bought time. Keep buying time. I'll call Pryor again and get an update on Marcus." He paused. "And David? You're doing good. Just hold on." I hung up and sat down at the kitchen table, surrounded by divorce papers I hadn't signed, holding a pen I hadn't used, staring at a clock that was counting down toward my wife, destroying everything I'd built. 4 hours until noon. And no word yet from Connecticut. Richard Vance's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Central Park. I'd been here dozens of times over the years, consultations on business deals, contract reviews, the occasional legal crisis that needed his particular brand of aggressive expertise. But I'd never been here like this, exhausted, desperate, running out of time. I arrived at 10:15 a.m. His assistant, Margaret, took one look at me and immediately brought coffee without being asked. "He's waiting for you," she said gently. Richard's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who charged $950 an hour. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, shelves lined with legal volumes and framed settlements from cases he'd won. He was standing at the window when I walked in, phone pressed to his ear, his grey suit perfectly tailored. "I understand that, Norman, but we need more time." A pause. "Yes, I know. I'll call you this afternoon." He hung up and turned to face me. "Sit." I sat. That was prior. Marcus is still alive, barely. The hospice nurse said his breathing has become more labored in the past hour. They've upped his morphine again. He's not conscious anymore. Richard walked to his desk and sat down across from me. "She thinks he'll go tonight or early tomorrow morning." "Tonight," I repeated. The word felt heavy. "Which means you need to hold Sarah off until at least tomorrow morning. What's your current deadline?" "Noon today, 4 hours from now." I checked my watch. 3 hours and 42 minutes to be exact. Richard pulled a legal pad toward him and uncapped his fountain pen. He was old school, never used computers for initial drafts. "Then we draft a counteroffer, something that looks legitimate enough to buy you time, but complicated enough that she can't just sign it and be done." "What kind of counteroffer?" "The kind that requires clarification, documentation, appraisals, and about 6 different lawyers to review before anyone can sign anything." He started writing, his handwriting sharp and precise. "We're going to request a formal valuation of the house. We're going to challenge her claim to your retirement accounts. We're going to demand itemized proof of her contributions to the marital estate. Every single asset she's claiming, we're going to make her prove she's entitled to it. Will that hold up in court? Eventually, no. But it'll buy us days, maybe weeks." He looked up at me. "More importantly, it'll buy us the next 18 hours. By the time she realizes this is a stalling tactic, Marcus will be gone and that $4.1 million will be locked in as your separate property." I watched him write, line after line of legal language that would turn Sarah's 43-page petition into a bureaucratic nightmare. What if she doesn't buy it? What if she sees through this and makes good on her threat? Richard set down his pen. "David, I've been doing this for 37 years. I've handled divorces uglier than you can imagine, wives who've hidden assets in offshore accounts, husbands who've faked disabilities to avoid paying support, people who've tried to murder their spouses to collect life insurance." He leaned back in his chair. "Sarah is angry, and she's greedy, but she's not stupid. She knows that if she makes false accusations against you, she'll face legal consequences. The threat is psychological warfare. She's betting you'll cave before she has to follow through. And if she doesn't cave? Then we prove she's lying and we destroy her credibility in court. But it won't come to that, because by this time tomorrow, you'll have an inheritance that changes the entire landscape of this divorce." He picked up his pen again. "Now let me finish this so you have something to bring home to her." I left Richard's office at 11:37 a.m. with a 12-page counter-proposal that was equal parts legal brilliance and bureaucratic torture. Every clause Sarah had written, Richard had challenged. Every asset she'd claimed, he'd demanded documentation for. Every assumption she'd made about marital property, he'd disputed with case law and precedent. It was beautiful in a way, like watching a master craftsman build something designed to frustrate and delay. I drove home through midday traffic, the counter-proposal sitting in a folder on the passenger seat. My phone buzzed 3 times during the drive. Sarah, asking where I was, why I wasn't home yet, whether I'd signed the papers. I didn't respond. When I pulled into the driveway at 12:18 p.m., 18 minutes past her noon deadline, Sarah's car was there, and I could see her silhouette in the kitchen window. I picked up the folder and walked inside. She was waiting at the kitchen table, the original divorce papers spread out in front of her. my unsigned Mont Blanc pen sitting on top of them like an accusation. "You're late," she said. "I was at my attorney's office." I set the folder down on the table. "We've prepared a response to your petition." "I don't want a response, I want your signature. My attorney has advised me that several aspects of your petition are legally questionable. We've drafted a counteroffer that more accurately reflects the law regarding asset distribution in New York State." I opened the folder and slid the 12 pages across to her. "You can review it with your attorney and get back to me." She picked up the first page and started reading. I watched her eyes move across the legal text, saw her expression shift from confusion to irritation to outright fury. "What the hell is this?" She slammed the page down. "Request for formal appraisal of marital residence. Documentation required for claimed contributions to joint savings account. Challenge to petitioner's claim of equitable distribution." It's a legal response, standard procedure in divorce proceedings. "This is bullshit, David." She stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "You're stalling. I'm protecting my rights." "By burying me in paperwork?" She grabbed the rest of the pages, flipping through them, her hands shaking with rage. "Request for tax returns. Request for employment history. Request for itemized list of expenditures during the marriage. This is deliberate obstruction. It's due diligence. You're asking for half of everything I've worked for. My attorney wants documentation that you're actually entitled to it." She threw the papers at me. They scattered across the kitchen floor, 12 pages of careful legal strategy reduced to garbage. "You want to play games?" Her voice was shaking now, tears of anger starting to form in her eyes. "Fine. We'll play games. But I promise you, David, you will regret this. Sarah, you have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock. She walked to the counter, grabbed her purse, and pulled out her phone. "If those original papers aren't signed by then, not your bullshit counteroffer, the papers I gave you Monday night, I'm posting everything on LinkedIn." My blood went cold. "What?" "LinkedIn. Your professional profile. The one all your clients follow. The one where you list yourself as senior partner at Harrington & Associates, trusted advisor, expert in corporate law." She held up her phone. "I'm going to post a detailed statement about your affair, with dates, locations, and screenshots. I'm going to tag your firm, I'm going to tag your clients, and I'm going to make sure everyone you've ever worked with knows exactly what kind of man you are. There is no affair. I know that, you know that, but will your clients know that? Will they care?" She smiled, and it was vicious. "You built your reputation on trust, David, on being the reliable one, the ethical one. What happens when I publicly accuse you of cheating on your wife while handling their multi-million-dollar deals? What happens when they start wondering if you're as trustworthy as you claim?" I stared at her, and I realized she'd found the one threat that actually terrified me. Calling Gerald Harrington was one thing. That was internal, containable, something that could be handled through HR and investigations. But posting on LinkedIn? That was public, permanent. Even if I proved it was false, the accusation would live forever in search results and screenshots. 9 a.m. tomorrow, she repeated. "Original papers, your signature, or I burn your reputation to the ground." She walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door open, then slam shut, then her car starting in the driveway. I stood there alone, surrounded by scattered legal documents, and checked my watch. 12:34 p.m., Tuesday. 20 hours and 26 minutes until her deadline. And Uncle Marcus was still alive. I spent Tuesday afternoon in my study, unable to work, unable to focus, just sitting at my desk and staring at my phone, waiting for a call from Richard, waiting for news from Connecticut, waiting for something to change. At 3:15 p.m., Richard called. Still no change. Pryor says Marcus is holding on. His vitals are weak but stable. The nurse thinks he might make it through the night. I have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I know. Sarah called my office an hour ago screaming about the counter-proposal. She's furious, David, which means we're doing something right. She's threatening to post about the affair on LinkedIn. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus, that's actually smart. Public accusations are harder to control than private ones. So what do? You hold. You don't engage. You don't respond to her threats, and you pray Marcus passes tonight. A pause. I'm sorry, that sounds cold. It is cold. I rubbed my eyes, exhausted. He's dying, and I'm sitting here hoping he dies faster so I can save my bank account. What kind of person does that make me? It makes you human, and it makes you smart. Marcus wanted you to have this money, David. He knew what Sarah was. He was protecting you from exactly this situation. I should have visited him more. You can't change the past. You can only protect your future. And right now your future depends on making it through the next 20 hours without signing anything. We hung up, and I sat there in the growing darkness of my study, watching the afternoon fade into evening, listening to the house creak and settle around me. Sarah came home at 7:30 p.m. I heard her car in the driveway, her footsteps in the hallway, the sound of her going upstairs to our bedroom without saying a word to me. At 9:00 p.m., I went to the guest room and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face when she'd threatened to post on LinkedIn. I saw Uncle Marcus in a hospital bed, struggling to breathe. I saw the divorce papers with their empty signature line. I saw my entire life, my career, my reputation, my financial security, balanced on a knife's edge. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. 12 hours left. Sleep well. I didn't sleep at all. The call came at 6:47 a.m. I'd been lying awake in the guest room for hours, watching the darkness outside the window slowly fade to grey, then to the pale blue of early morning. My phone was on the nightstand, volume turned all the way up, and when it rang I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. Richard? He's gone. Richard's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Norman Pryor just called me. Marcus passed away at 4:12 this morning. Time of death was officially recorded at Greenwich Hospital at 4:16 a.m. I closed my eyes. Felt something heavy and tight in my chest release all at once. He went peacefully, Richard continued, in his sleep. The nurse said he just stopped breathing, no pain, no struggle, he was ready. I should have been there, I said, my voice cracking. You couldn't have been there, David. Sarah would have known something was wrong. She would have delayed the divorce, changed her strategy, anything to stay legally married long enough to claim a portion of the inheritance. A pause. Marcus understood. Pryor told me Marcus specifically instructed him to wait until after he'd passed to notify you, precisely because he didn't want Sarah to interfere. I sat up in bed, my hands shaking. So what happens now? Now? Now we win. Richard's voice changed, became sharper, more businesslike. Marcus died at 4:12 a.m. on Wednesday, November 13th. You are still legally married. You have not signed any separation agreements, any divorce petitions, or any asset distribution documents. Under New York estate law and the specific language in Marcus's will, the $4.1 million inheritance is now irrevocably classified as your separate property. Sarah can't touch it. Sarah can't touch it. Not $1. Not even if she hired the best divorce attorney in the country, which she didn't because Mitchell and Crane are good, but not that good. The inheritance is yours, completely, forever. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the morning light filtering through the trees in our backyard. Our backyard, which Sarah wanted to take from me. What about her deadline? It's 9 a.m., 2 hours from now. Fuck her deadline. Richard's voice was hard now. Here's what we do. I'm going to call Norman Pryor and have him send you an official notification letter confirming your status as sole beneficiary of Marcus's estate. That letter will be time-stamped and dated today, November 13th. Then I'm going to draft a formal response to Sarah's divorce petition. Not the stalling tactic from yesterday, a real response. One that protects your actual interests. And I don't sign her papers. You don't sign her papers. You let her post on LinkedIn if she wants. You let her call your office. You let her do whatever the hell she wants, because none of it matters anymore. The inheritance is locked in, she has no leverage left. I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 days. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. When can we tell her? Not yet. Let her think she's winning. Let her make her threats. Let her call your office, post on LinkedIn, whatever she wants to do. The more unhinged she acts, the better it looks for us in court. Richard paused. We'll tell her at the right moment, when it'll hurt the most. You're enjoying this? Damn right I am. She tried to blackmail you, David. She tried to destroy your reputation based on lies. She deserves what's coming to her. We talked for another 15 minutes. Logistics, timelines, legal strategy. By the time we hung up, I had a plan. And for the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe. At 8:45 a.m., I went downstairs. Sarah was in the kitchen, already dressed, already waiting. The divorce papers were on the table. The Mont Blanc pen was positioned exactly where it had been every other time she'd demanded I sign. "You have 15 minutes, she said without looking up from her coffee. "I'm not signing." Her head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "I'm not signing your papers, Sarah. Not today. Not ever. At least, not those papers." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "My attorney is drafting a formal response to your petition. You'll receive it within the next week. Until then, I'm advising you that any threats, any public accusations, or any attempts to damage my professional reputation will be met with immediate legal action." She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't quite process what I'd just said. "You're calling my bluff," she said finally. "I'm calling your bluff. You're going to let me post on LinkedIn. You're going to let me tell everyone at your firm that you cheated on me. If that's what you want to do, yes." I leaned back in my chair and I let myself smile. Just a little, just enough to show her I wasn't afraid anymore. "Go ahead, Sarah, post it. Tell everyone I had an affair. Tag my firm, my clients, everyone you can think of." "You're insane. I'm protected. By the truth, by the law, and by something you don't know about yet." I stood up, picked up her divorce papers and set them down in front of her. "You wanted to play games? You wanted to threaten and manipulate and try to steal everything I've built? Fine. But you should have been smarter about it." "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough." I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. "By the way, my Uncle Marcus passed away early this morning. The funeral will be in Greenwich this weekend. You're not invited." I left her sitting there at the kitchen table, surrounded by unsigned papers, and I walked upstairs to pack a bag. I was done sleeping in the guest room. I was done being afraid, and I was $4.1 million richer than I'd been 3 days ago. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Sarah had posted. I opened the app and read her statement. "After 24 years of marriage, I've discovered that my husband, David Mitchell, senior partner at Harrington and Associates, has been carrying on an affair with a paralegal in Chicago. I have evidence of hotel stays, dinners, and business trips that were nothing but cover for his infidelity. To anyone considering working with him, ask yourself if you can trust a man who lies to his own wife." She'd tagged Harrington and Associates. She'd tagged 3 of my major clients. She'd made the post public. And she'd just destroyed any credibility she might have had in our divorce proceedings. I called Richard. "She posted," I said. "I saw. I've already got our litigation team drafting a defamation complaint. We'll file it this afternoon." He sounded almost gleeful. "She just handed us everything we need to bury her in court, David. False accusations made in public, with malicious intent, causing reputational harm to your professional standing. This is textbook defamation." "What about my clients?" "I've already sent emails to the 3 she tagged, informing them that these accusations are false and that we're pursuing legal action. I've also contacted Gerald Harrington directly. He's furious at Sarah, not at you. He wants to meet with you this afternoon to discuss the firm's official response." I sat down on the edge of the guest bed, looking at Sarah's LinkedIn post on my phone. 3 days ago, this would have terrified me. Now, it was just evidence. "When do we tell her about the inheritance?" I asked. "Let's give it a few more days. Let her think she's winning. Let her make more mistakes." Richard paused. "Then we'll serve her with our counter-petition, and we'll include a copy of the inheritance notification letter, and we'll watch her realize she just destroyed her marriage, her reputation, and her leverage for absolutely nothing." I hung up and sat there in the silence of the guest room, holding my phone, reading Sarah's accusations again and again. 24 years of marriage, gone in 3 days. But I'd survived. I'd held the line. I'd protected what was mine. And Uncle Marcus, wherever he was now, had given me the gift of a future without her. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the morning. Wednesday, November 13th. The day my uncle died, the day my marriage ended, and the day I became $4.1 million richer. I should have felt guilty about the timing. Instead, I just felt free. The conference room at Richard Vance's office was designed for exactly this kind of meeting. Neutral grey walls, a long table made of dark wood, leather chairs that didn't squeak, windows that looked out over Midtown but were tinted just enough that you couldn't see the details, just shapes and light and the vague impression of a city going about its business. It was Wednesday, November 23rd, 10 days since Uncle Marcus had died. 10 days since Sarah had posted her accusations on LinkedIn. 10 days since I'd stopped sleeping in the guest room of my own house and started sleeping in a corporate apartment that my firm kept for visiting clients. Sarah arrived at 2 p.m. exactly, wearing a navy blue suit I'd never seen before, new, probably bought specifically for this meeting. Her attorney, James Mitchell from Mitchell & Crane, walked beside her carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive. They both looked confident, prepared, like people who thought they were about to win. I was already seated when they walked in, Richard beside me, both of us in our standard work uniforms, dark suits, crisp shirts, ties that cost more than most people's car payments. Richard had a single manila folder in front of him. I had nothing. Just my hands folded on the table, my expression neutral. David. Sarah's voice was softer than it had been in weeks, almost gentle. She'd been trying this approach since the LinkedIn post, reaching out with text messages that started with, "Can we talk?" And I think we both said things we didn't mean. I didn't look at her. "Shall we begin?" Richard said, gesturing to the empty chairs across from us. James Mitchell sat down first, pulling out his own folder and arranging papers, with the kind of deliberate care lawyers use when they want to look organized. Sarah sat beside him, her hands clasped on the table in a mirror of my own posture. "Thank you for agreeing to this mediation session," James began. His voice had that smooth quality that expensive attorneys cultivate, friendly but firm, reasonable but unyielding. "My client is hoping we can reach a settlement that's fair to both parties, without the need for prolonged litigation." "We're open to discussion," Richard said, his tone matching James's exactly. "Good. Then let me outline my client's position." James opened his folder and pulled out a document. Sarah's original petition. I recognized it immediately. "Mrs. Mitchell is seeking equitable distribution of all marital assets, including the primary residence located at 247 Whitmore Lane, valued at approximately $890,000. She's also requesting 50% of the joint savings account, totaling $170,000 per party. Additionally, she's asking for spousal maintenance of $1,800 per month for a period of 5 years, given that she sacrificed her own career opportunities to support Mr. Mitchell's professional advancement. Sarah was nodding along, her expression sympathetic, like she was the victim of a 24-year injustice that had finally come to light. "And in exchange," James continued, "Mrs. Mitchell is willing to withdraw her public statements regarding Mr. Mitchell's alleged infidelity, acknowledging that those statements were made in a moment of emotional distress and may not have been entirely accurate." "May not have been entirely accurate," Richard repeated, his voice flat. "That's an interesting way to describe defamation." James smiled tightly. "My client was upset. The marriage was ending. Sometimes people say things they don't mean in the heat of the moment." She didn't just say it. She posted it publicly on LinkedIn. She tagged his employer and his clients. She caused measurable harm to his professional reputation. Richard leaned forward slightly. "But we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's address your asset distribution request. We believe it's fair." "It's not." Richard opened his manila folder. Inside was a single document. He slid it across the table to James. "This is an official estate notification letter from Norman Pryor, attorney for the estate of Marcus Holloway, dated November 13th of this year." I watched James pick up the letter, watched his eyes scan the first paragraph, watched his expression shift from confidence to confusion. "I don't understand," he said. "What does your client's uncle's estate have to do with—" Marcus Holloway passed away on November 13th at 4:12 a.m. He left his entire estate, valued at $4.1 million, to David Mitchell as sole beneficiary. Richard's voice was calm, almost conversational. The will explicitly designates this inheritance as Mr. Mitchell's separate property, to be held solely in his name in the event of divorce. Sarah's face went pale. What? Your client demanded that Mr. Mitchell sign divorce papers on November 11th at midnight, Richard continued, looking at James but clearly speaking for Sarah's benefit. She then extended that deadline multiple times, 8:02 a.m. on November 12th, noon that same day, and finally 9:00 a.m. on November 13th. Mr. Mitchell, on the advice of counsel, declined to sign. Because you were stalling, Sarah said, her voice rising. She looked at me. You knew your uncle was dying and you stalled. Mr. Mitchell exercised his legal right to consult with counsel before signing any binding documents, Richard interrupted smoothly, which is fortunate because at 4:12 a.m. on November 13th, 5 hours before your deadline, Marcus Holloway passed away. At that moment, the inheritance became Mr. Mitchell's separate property under New York estate law. James was reading the letter more carefully now, his lips pressed into a thin line. The timing is convenient. The timing is what it is. Marcus Holloway died when he died. Mr. Mitchell didn't control that. What he did control was his decision not to sign papers that would have given your client access to assets she has no legal claim to. I'm his wife, Sarah started. You were in the process of divorcing him, Richard corrected. The marriage had irretrievably broken down. You'd served him with papers demanding immediate dissolution. The inheritance was received after that breakdown, but before any formal legal separation. Under New York law, and under the specific language of Marcus Holloway's will, that makes it separate property. Your client has zero claim to any portion of that $4.1 million. The silence in the conference room was absolute. I could see Sarah's mind working, trying to find an angle, a loophole, anything that would let her get a piece of that money. Her hand moved to James's arm, squeezing it. There has to be something we can do, she whispered. There isn't, Richard said, and now there was something almost gentle in his voice, the gentleness of a surgeon delivering bad news. The inheritance is locked in. It's not subject to negotiation, distribution, or any claim your client might make. It's simply not part of the marital estate. Fine. Sarah's voice was shaking now. Fine. He can keep his uncle's money. But I still get the house, I still get half the savings, I still get... Actually, you don't. Richard pulled out a second document from his folder. This is a counter-petition we've prepared on Mr. Mitchell's behalf. We're requesting that Mr. Mitchell retain full ownership of the primary residence at 247 Whitmore Lane, given that it was purchased with funds from his pre-marital partnership bonus in 1998, 2 years before your marriage. We're also requesting that the joint savings account be split 60-40 in Mr. Mitchell's favor, reflecting his disproportionate contributions to that account over the course of the marriage. That's not fair. What's not fair, Richard said, his voice hardening, is your client posting false accusations of infidelity on a public platform in an attempt to extort my client into signing an unfavorable settlement. What's not fair is her tagging his employer and his clients in those accusations, causing measurable harm to his professional reputation and business relationships. James closed his eyes briefly. This is about the LinkedIn post. This is absolutely about the LinkedIn post. Your client committed defamation, publicly, maliciously, with the specific intent of causing professional harm to my client. Richard slid a third document across the table. This is a civil complaint for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're seeking $500,000 in damages, plus attorney's fees. Sarah made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. You're suing me. We're countersuing you, Richard corrected. You started this with threats and blackmail. We're finishing it with the legal consequences of your actions. But I deleted the post. I took it down after a few hours. Screenshots are forever, Mrs. Mitchell. We have documentation of your post, the exact wording, the time it was published, who you tagged, and the responses it received. We also have statements from 3 of Mr. Mitchell's clients expressing concern about the accusations. That's documented harm to his professional reputation. That's defamation. Sarah turned to look at me, her eyes wide, desperate. "David, please. We can talk about this. We don't need lawyers fighting over—" I looked at my watch. 2:47 p.m. We'd been in this conference room for 47 minutes. "I think we're done here," I said. My voice was calm, quiet. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and looked at James. "Your client has 72 hours to respond to our counterpetition. If she wants to settle, we're open to discussion. If she wants to fight this in court, we have the resources and the evidence to win. Her choice." I walked toward the door. "David!" Sarah stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can't just, after 24 years, you can't just walk away." I stopped at the door and turned to look at her, really looked at her, at the woman I'd married when I was 28 and she was 20, at the woman who'd stood beside me at my mother's funeral, who'd celebrated with me when I made partner, who'd shared my bed and my life for more than 2 decades. And I felt nothing. "You wanted a divorce," I said. "I'm giving you one. On terms that reflect reality instead of your fantasy of what you think you're entitled to." I paused. "You should have taken the house and walked away, Sarah. You should have been satisfied with what you had. Instead, you got greedy, you got vindictive, and now you get consequences." I walked out of the conference room, Richard following behind me, and I didn't look back. Behind us, I could hear Sarah crying. I could hear James's voice, low and urgent, probably explaining to her just how badly she'd miscalculated. But I didn't stop. I got in the elevator, rode down 42 floors, walked out onto the street into the cold November air, and I called Uncle Marcus's estate lawyer. "Norman, it's David Mitchell. I'd like to discuss establishing a scholarship fund in my uncle's name. Something for first-generation law students. Can we set up a meeting?" We talked for 10 minutes about logistics and funding and memorial opportunities, and the entire time I didn't think about Sarah once. 6 months later, I was sitting in what used to be my study, what was now just my study, watching the sun set through the windows I'd cleaned myself the day before. The house was quiet. Bailey was asleep on his bed by the fireplace, snoring softly. The guest room was now just a guest room again, not a refuge from my own bedroom. The kitchen table held only my laptop and a cup of coffee, not divorce papers and ultimatums. Sarah had settled 8 weeks after that mediation meeting. She'd walked away with $85,000 from the joint savings account, half of what was left after legal fees. She'd walked away with her car, paid off in full as a condition of the settlement. She'd walked away with no claim to the house, no claim to my retirement accounts, and no claim to Uncle Marcus's inheritance. In exchange, I'd agreed not to pursue the defamation lawsuit. Richard had argued against it. He'd wanted to take her to court, wanted to make her pay for the LinkedIn post and the threats and all of it. But I was tired of fighting, tired of being angry, tired of waking up every morning with my first thought being about revenge. So we'd settled. She'd signed a document acknowledging that her accusations were false, that she'd made them in emotional distress, and that she retracted them completely. That document was filed with the court as part of our divorce decree, public record, permanent. She'd also signed an NDA prohibiting her from discussing the details of our divorce or making any further public statements about me. Break the NDA, and she'd owe $250,000 in liquidated damages. She'd signed everything, quickly, desperately, because her attorney had explained to her, in terms even she couldn't misunderstand, that fighting me in court would cost money she didn't have and would result in outcomes that would be worse than what we were offering. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she was living in a rental in White Plains now, working full-time as a real estate agent, actually working, not just pretending. Driving a used Honda instead of the Lexus SUV I'd paid off for her, living a life that looked nothing like the one she'd thought she'd have when she'd slammed those divorce papers onto my desk. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. The inheritance had hit my account 4 months ago, after the probate process had finally cleared. $4.1 million minus estate taxes and legal fees, leaving me with roughly $3.2 million in liquid assets. More money than I'd ever imagined having. I'd done 2 things with it. First, I'd established the Marcus Holloway Memorial Scholarship at Columbia Law School. $50,000 annually for first-generation law students who needed financial support. The kind of students Uncle Marcus would have championed. Kids from working-class families who were smart and driven but didn't have trust funds or family connections. Second, I'd bought a lake house in Vermont. Small, isolated, peaceful. A place I could go on weekends when the city felt too crowded and the memory of my marriage felt too heavy. The rest sat in investments, managed by a financial advisor who didn't ask questions about why a 52-year-old lawyer suddenly had 7 figures to invest. I'd thought about selling the house on Whitmore Lane. Too many memories, too many rooms that still echoed with arguments and silences, and the slow death of something that had once been good. But I'd decided to keep it, at least for now, because selling it would feel like running away, and I was done running. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Richard Vance. "Dinner next week? Margaret wants to celebrate your freedom properly." I smiled and typed back, "Only if she promises not to try to set me up with her daughter again." No promises. I set the phone down and looked around my study, at the law books I'd collected over decades, at the framed photographs of cases I'd won, deals I'd closed, clients who'd trusted me with their most important transactions, at the life I'd built through patience and persistence and playing by the rules. Sarah had tried to take all of it based on threats and lies, and she'd lost. Not because I'd been smarter, though I had been, not because I'd been richer, though I was now, but because I'd been patient. Because I'd known that sometimes the best strategy is to do nothing, to wait, to let the other side make mistakes while you stay silent and let the law protect you. She'd wanted a war. She hadn't realized I was patiently waiting for the ammunition. I stood up, walked to the window and watched the last light fade from the sky. 24 years of marriage ended in a conference room with lawyers and documents and the cold machinery of legal dissolution. But I was free. Free from the threats. Free from the manipulation. Free from the constant fear that everything I'd built could be taken away by someone who'd decided I was disposable. Bailey stretched and yawned, looking up at me with those gentle brown eyes that had been my only consistent companion through the worst months of my life. "Come on, boy," I said. "Let's go for a walk." We walked through the neighborhood as the streetlights came on, past houses where families were sitting down to dinner, where marriages were intact or broken in their own private ways, where lives were being lived in patterns I'd once thought were universal, and now knew were just one option among many. When we got back to the house, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I had work to do, a contract review for a client in Singapore, a conference call scheduled for tomorrow morning with a startup founder who needed advice on a merger. Life went on, different than it had been, quieter, lonelier maybe, but mine, completely, irrevocably mine. And that was worth more than all of Uncle Marcus's money combined. She wanted a war. She didn't realize I was patiently waiting for the ammunition. If you enjoyed this story of patience and justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to Vows and Lies. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the good guys eventually win. Sometimes the loudest weapon is silence, sometimes the strongest position is patience, and sometimes the best revenge is simply outlasting the person who tried to destroy you. Thanks for listening.